Last episode we covered the steps it took to embed 20 kilos of lead in the boat's centerboard and get it ready for fiberglassing. Now we can finally start laying the first sheets of glass and look at how we approach it. Okay, so here's our centerboard case. I have just marked out and drilled all the holes. I've covered it how I mark and drill holes before, so I didn't want to really film it. A centerboard case is symmetrical, which meant that I can just clamp both sides together. And now I should find that the holes that I've drilled for one are on the other. So yeah, that all saves a little bit of work when you can just clamp things up and just go ahead and drill. Countersink everything, and now what I need to do is we'll just clamp it all together and we'll screw those spaces in. So we want to do a dry fit. We want to get everything set up, marked out, all ready, so when I epoxy this together, it'll go together smoothly. It's exactly the same way we've done everything else. But I'm pretty happy with that. Some of these I might have to countersink a little bit more, but I won't know until I've actually put some screws in there, and then we can sort it out. I've put the screws in here and I can just mark those holes that just need a little bit more countersinking. You won't see those screws. I don't want them to be visible, but also I don't want salt water to be able to access them. They're 304 screws, but also if you leave them open, water of course will be able to go down there. So they'll be topped off with filler and covered over, and you'll never know they're there. If we look on the top, I've also put a couple of reference marks here, and that's just so when everything's getting screwed back together, when we epoxy this into one big unit, there won't be any guesswork. I'll just be able to straight up just line everything up, and that's how we've pretty much gone for the whole way. So this all looks pretty good. Now that I know that this unit is all set up, all the screw holes are drilled for the spacer, they're done for this, we can take this apart and we can work out now where we're going to drill the hole for the centerboard pin. Well, we don't have to work it out, I actually have a spot, but I need to confirm that it is in the right spot, so we'll have a look at that. Pretty good. At the moment it's still only relatively heavy. Once we get that centerboard in there, it's going to be very, very heavy. The light's starting to blind me now as it's falling down. Okay, so I've moved my drill press down here where you know, I can support this work, because it's a big thing that I have to drill. People like to make fun of my drill press. I can see where they're coming from, but you know, this would be very hard to do with a pedestal drill. Just sort of move it from where it is and re-secure it somewhere a bit more convenient. But now I have a much larger and stable drill platform, so that's good. Probably one of the takeaways that I hope people watching this get is that this boat's being built, I mean obviously it's a modest little boat, but this boat is not being built with a lot of tools. The tools that I'm using are not sophisticated, they're not particularly expensive. And this workshop is not, it's not your typical YouTube workshop I'd hazard a guess at. I know I have seen a few things on YouTube where someone's just like, oh okay, we'll make this simple table or something like that, and then they go over to their $30,000 CNC machine. As well as drilling the pilot hole for the centerboard pivot, I was also able to drill the holes to receive the Dyneema lifting strop I had devised rather than the stainless steel that was in the plans. And we can see the groove for it being cut in the last episode. I'm using 6mm Dyneema run into a 6.5mm hole. It's a tight fit but pushes through if the ends are melted when cut and dressed up neatly. With the length required worked out, I marked where I would put a locked brummel to secure my low friction ring.
Having both ends of the line makes this pretty easy. Despite the neat ends, I still needed my fine fid to push the dyneema through. Once the low friction ring was centred, I could cut the dyneema flush with the groove.
So there we go, they're cut flush because I'm going to be using epoxy to embed that in there. I don't need knots or anything like that. It's going to be as strong as anything. Good articulation, nothing to corrode, and all good. This low friction ring, we should be able to use that in our mechanical purchase later to lift this thing up out of the water, but we'll get to that. I really like dyneema, really like low friction rings. If you didn't check out our refit series over in Tasmania, you should, but we used a lot of that stuff when we refit our 30 footer, all in dyneema. So if you're interested in that stuff, you can go back and I'll just put a link to the video up in the top of the screen now actually.
Prior to fiberglassing the centerboard, I wanted to give it a coat of resin to avoid any dry spots once the glass went on.
Okay, this is, well actually it looks really nice. I always like wood once you throw a bit of resin on it. I just want to remind people that you don't have to spread epoxy on things with a brush, all right? You can use a card. This was a little plastic card that I got from a sample stand at the hardware advertising polycarbonate roof sheeting. Because it's flexible, it can do curves. So I just did want to just reiterate that because it can save people over the life of a boat build. Not having to use chip brushes all the time, but using a card that's very easily cleaned and reusable and lasts forever. If you're using chip brushes, this is unused at the moment, if you're using these, each time you do it, you pretty much throw these away. That's a lot of rubbish, and they do cost money. This costs nothing, and it's super easy to clean. When it does finally, when it's just, I've left it dirty and I can't use it anymore, I'll just pop that in the bin. And go and get myself another free sample, but I'll only be putting that in the bin rather than like 100 of those, because these last a long time. They're also, as you'll see soon, perfect for spreading resin when you are fiberglassing, but we'll get to that. I should just thicken up some of that leftover epoxy, pop that in that dyneema, so get rid of that. But that's looking really good, that's soaking in nicely. If I throw that thickened epoxy in now, it might stop it from spilling over the edge like a little slow motion waterfall.
Cutting out the shape of the fiberglass sheet is pretty straightforward, but you do need a good pair of scissors. A neat trick for getting a good accurate cutting line at the length you want is to pull one of the fill threads out, which leaves a clear gap to follow with your scissors. I cut the curved section by eye. Where a fold might occur is the place to put a slit so the glass will lay nicely. So when I did the final coat of resin, I had intended to come back to this, but life sort of got in the way a little bit. So it's been a few days and I've been doing other things. So I did rinse it down with water to get rid of any amines, rinsed it off with methylated spirits to grab the water, because metho picks up water pretty well. And now I'll just give it a very light keying sand and we can pop some fiberglass on here. So there's my fiberglass, fairly neatly cut to fit this centerboard. I'm going to finish the fiberglassing up on this hardwood strip that I put there earlier, rather than wrap it around, but I do want to wrap it around the front, so I'll just make sure it's all in place. I did scrunch it up a little bit, which isn't ideal. Doesn't matter, once we wet this out with resin it should flatten out okay. I just wanted to weigh it. So whatever the weight of the fiberglass is the weight of resin that it's going to take. So in this instance it was about 86 grams. So 75 ml of resin, because it's heavier than water, 75 ml of resin was about 89 grams. So we'll see how we go. It is pretty close, so we want to be very conservative with how we put it on. You know, if you oversaturate, it's not ideal, and if you undersaturate, if it's a bit too dry, then you'll get these dry spots and you won't have good adhesion. So. And again, just so I'm saving on a bit of money, I've found that a scraper does a pretty good job of wetting out fiberglass. Some people like to use brushes. That's fine, but you'll generate a lot more waste that way. I just think a scraper is easier to clean, but we've already covered that. If you've never done fiberglassing before, which is probably unusual for people watching this, but if you've never done it, you'll know that you've wet it out properly once it goes invisible, once it goes nice and clear. I find using this card to sort of scrape resin around is very good at making sure there's no air trapped under the actual weave of the cloth. But it's quite easy just to pick up a bit of extra resin and push it around. Where you see, like when you look low, you catch the light and you can actually see large pools of it. It's quite easy to pick it up and put it where you don't have enough resin. With a brush, that's not quite quite as easy. Brushes are quite soft, they go into places where scrapers can't, and so they have their place for sure. But usually when you're using a brush, you also need to use a roller as well. Sometimes you can cut out the roller step with using a card. Fiberglassing is pretty notorious as being a messy job, but if you've got time to work, you know, like it's a little bit cool at the moment, and you don't try and operate with too much resin. And when I say that, like different people with different experience levels can handle different amounts of resin going off at any given time. They work quickly and efficiently, more so than me, that's for sure. But as you get a bit of experience, you can get a bit more ambitious, go a little bit harder, and then it isn't quite so messy, but it definitely has the potential for disaster. Everything covered in crap. I definitely saw before some of this wasn't wetting out properly. Just left it for a bit, just left the resin time to work into the fibres, and then you can always come back to it. So patience is sort of a good thing to have when you're mucking around with this stuff. So this scrape has been quite effective at conserving the resin. We've got good wet out, and this is pretty much it. I've just poured out the last easy stuff I can get out of that cup, just to wet out this. And so basically I just wanted to wet the fiberglass up to this dark wood, because that was a very hard wearing wood that I put there as a cap. It will be resined, it'll be encased in epoxy, but I don't necessarily need to have fiberglass all the way around that. All of this softwood is well protected though. And it is folding around this edge here. When I fiberglass the other side, it'll wrap. They'll overlap with each other. I will have to do a little bit of fairing there to make it look neat. That should be fine. Well, we've got some good rain coming in now. So there will be a bit more work that I'm going to be doing on this. I'm not going to use peel ply on this centerboard. areas where I really want a nice finish, I would use peel ply, but this one I'm not going to. I don't mind just washing this down with a bit of water. Boat coat's not really a, doesn't really have an amine problem as it is, but this looks pretty good. So I want this to set, and then I'll flip it over and we'll get the other side done. This looks pretty good. I can see a dry patch here that I'll just have to sand out, but it's tiny, so that's not too bad. Good adhesion all along this edge. I can see that it's wetted out right to the edge, so there's no dry bits along that trailing edge, which is really great. Let's come down. That all looks really good. I can't feel any of that. Oh, I can see that that's a bit smooth. There's a bit of a pooled resin there. Maybe I'll give that a bit of sand. You can actually see it's rolled down, so I just had a bit of excess there, but everything else is very consistent. I can feel the weave of the fiberglass. That's okay. I'm going to give it another coat of resin afterwards. I still need to do some more fiberglassing on this corner here for reinforcing. That's what the designers asked for. So that weave will disappear, and of course once we come to paint it, we'll put some high build on there and that'll disappear. But that's pretty good. That was a good result. This is not a difficult fiberglassing job. Everything's nice and smooth. It's not big, so we should expect that it's going to be. Okay. Sanding at the best of times is a fairly unenjoyable job, but particularly with fiberglass. So it is actually glass, and once it's been reinforced with resin, once it's been made hard, you're sanding these little shards, and they are itchy, they can irritate. So if we can avoid sanding as much as possible, get rid of a lot of this. So using just the right amount of resin, so a lot of it is still just soft fibre, that helps, that goes a long way. But if you can actually cut a lot of that stuff with like a blade, Stanley knife, something like that, avoid sanding, that'll make you a happier person in the long run. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Everything's very uniform. I got everything down. Didn't have to use a roller at all. Just a card scraper was perfectly fine. There was plenty. So I got good wetting out all the way to the edges. Just here, the fiberglass only just reached the edge. But this is a little bit oversized because it goes down through the bottom of the hull, and then it's trimmed to size, so that's okay. I only just made it, you know, this glass is 1 metre wide, so this is only just possible, but it was really nice. It saved a bit of time to be able to just run that one sheet and just glass both of these components together as one, so very good. Okay, so I have to just let all this cure, and then we can go about drilling everything ready for assembly. So this is nice, being able to have, you know, like while the centerboard case is curing, it gives me a chance to do this, so I can get a fair bit done. I have to manage my time fairly well. I don't have every day and infinite hours of the day to work on this boat. You know, some of my days are devoted to making the video, so it usually takes, what I've got 2 days of working on the boat usually that I can budget. 2 days is actually putting the video out for you guys, and other parts is devoted to sort of running the farm here. I just recently turned a couple of our pigs into a bunch of chops, so that took a little bit of time. I've got to be a dad, so I can sympathise with all those people out there that are part-time boat builders, you know, with all the other commitments. It must be nice to just be able to do it full-time, but that's just not how it is. So like I said before, sometimes it's just a case of just letting the resin sit on there, give gravity a chance to help you, and it will wet out the glass. The scraper is very, very good for squeezing out excess without leaving it dry, because it's going over the top of the actual weaves. So I definitely think here, where we've got a curve coming in, a curve meeting there in a flat surface, that this roller is actually quite good at just making sure that the glass conforms to all of those, and that it's well wetted out with resin. Hopefully we avoid a little dry patch like we got on the other side. That looks pretty good though. Okay, I've split these apart. They look pretty good, bonded right to the edge, which is, you know, what I'm after. Very, very uniform. Again, no dry patches. I've got one more step for these. So these are going to be, this is going to be the inside of the case. No sunlight's going to get to it, but I would like this to be white. Now I haven't gone and got any paint yet, but what I do have is some epoxy dye. So we'll have a look at that. So I've got 150 ml of resin here. Here's our epoxy dye. I borrowed Pascal's scales, and I found that this weighs 170 grams. So with epoxy dyes, most of them, and this one in particular, somewhere between 2 and 5% is how much you add. Once you start going above that, then you can start to influence how the epoxy sets. So 5% we'll go with. 170, 10% is 17, isn't it? So let's just go half of that. Because it's somewhere between 2 and 5, I'll just put 8 grams of this stuff in here. Okay, so this is looking fairly consistent, fairly solid. I'm pretty happy with it. If you're new to epoxy and you're wondering how long you mix the part A and B together, I've always gone with 2 minutes. That was the recommendation that I got, and I've always had good results. It is important to mix them thoroughly because you're relying on a chemical reaction. You need that good mixing, and that mixing is before you add anything else, thickeners, or in this case dye. So I've been stirring this for another 2 minutes. I've got time to spare in this cooler weather. It's not going to go off. So I just want to make sure that it was all nice and uniformly mixed through. I think instead of spreading this with a card, I'm just going to pop this on with a roller, exactly like I would with paint. That looks great. All right, so this experiment has been fairly successful. This needs another coat, but I've always used epoxy dyes for casting. I haven't used it spread over fiberglass like this So yeah, it's not, you know, it's not amazing compared to a paint job. I think another coat though will do what I want. So it'll protect it, but it'll also lighten up the inside of our centerboard case, so I can see what's going on there if I ever have a problem I need to resolve. This fiberglass now is a little bit beyond, what am I trying to say? A little bit beyond using the Stanley knife anymore, but the flush cutting blade on multi-tool. Knock it off very well. I don't want to go too far with that, just because I'd like to have some breathing protection in the vacuum while I do that. So I won't do that on camera now, but I've already covered this thing and various attachments for it, so I'll just go ahead and do that. This looks really great. So we talked about you know, wetting this out with the card. You can see that it's given us a good result. Where the overlap is, I do need to sand that, and that's what I'm going to go ahead with. I won't film that because sanding's as boring as anything. This looks all pretty good. So this is at the stage now where I'll just put those reinforcing bits of glass, and when I rejoin you, what we'll do is we'll put the center bush in, and we'll get all this together, because as soon as this is together, then we can start on our building frame. Now, in the plans for building this boat, you're given the plans for this building frame, and I didn't do that, because what I found was there were some workbenches when I came to the property. The guy that was caretaking before left, and he built some, and he didn't want to take them, so I said I'll keep them. So I've chopped them down and I'll put them here. So I'm going to adapt these to the build. So we might look at that as well when I get back to you. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me. I'm going to go for it now, and catch you next episode. Thank you very much for joining us as always. I really appreciate that you give up some of your valuable time to spend it with us. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the lovely comments. And as always, thank you for those people that have, well, just joined Patreon. I just saw that we've got a few new patrons, so thank you very much. And some people have been sending super thanks in the comments, as well as some PayPal. Thank you very much for that. I've got lots to do. I'm going to get into it, and I'll see you next episode.